In the 3 weeks since former President Donald Trump won a stunning re-election victory, flipping every swing district red and walking away with the majority of Latino men and record numbers of black voters for his party, the Democrats have been scrambling to explain this victory. It wasn't just the Democrats who lost. The narrative of division, of polarization, of a racist MAGA threat to democracy that has been the Democrats' singular electoral issue apart from abortion for the past decade was assassinated as minority voters propelled Donald Trump to victory. As often happens in the wake of crushing Democratic loss, even top Democrats have been admitting the kinds of things they usually go to great pains to censor. There have been admissions that cancel culture exists and is bad, that Democratic elites are out of touch with average Americans on issues like trans athletes and women's sports, and that maybe swing voters have a right to expect their candidates to be able to express an upper limit on the right to an abortion. In a sign of how deep the soul-searching is going, progressive standard-bearer Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez no longer has her pronouns in her Twitter bio. The vibe, it has shifted. But while the right is crowing over the left getting a real spanking from voters on the culture war front, I think both sides are making a mistake when it comes to why Trump won. Both are eager to view Trump's victory as a reflection of voters becoming sick and tired of woke overreach because the elites of both sides are still reluctant to admit the truth, that Trump won by promising to revolutionize the economy against the elites on behalf of the working class through a strong border and tariffs. Now, this is not to deny that Trump's views on culture war issues were much closer to those of the average voter, Democrat or Republican. His view on abortion, for example, hews much closer to where the vast majority of Americans are on the issue than the left's. In a humiliating turn for the pro-life right, Trump said he thinks abortion should be legal for 12 weeks, the view most pro-choice Americans have. And most Americans are like Trump on gender issues. They are very pro-gay, but keen to keep trans athletes out of women's sports and women's bathrooms and LGBT messaging out of their kids' schools. Trump was a consensus candidate on the cultural issues, while the Democrats chose positions far outside the mainstream. And yet, all the data we have suggests that the economy played a much bigger role in the election. Polling consistently showed throughout the election and since that the economy and inflation were top of mind for voters. Inflation was too high under the Biden-Harris administration was the top reason given by Latino voters, black voters, and all voters to blueprint pollsters who chose Trump over Vice President Kamala Harris. The economy was followed closely by immigration, which may be a cultural issue for elites, but is an economic concern for working-class voters who illegal immigrants compete with for jobs and whose wages have suffered as a result of Biden's decriminalization of illegal border crossing for 3 years. The same can be said about EV mandates. While environmental policy may be a culture war issue for people working knowledge industry office jobs in walkable cities, for people working in the Rust Belt or the Democrats' blue wall of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, all of which went for Trump, EV mandates mean jobs lost. Much of the EV supply chain is in China. And even when electric cars are made here, they require a third of the time on the line in a factory compared to gas cars. Contrary to the narrative of the left, Michigan did not go for Trump because 200,000 Muslim Americans were protesting Gaza. It went for Trump because 600,000 auto workers were protesting EV mandates. That same blueprint polling found that 82% of swing voters who broke for Trump believe that Harris supported requiring all cars manufactured in the U.S. to be electric vehicles by 2035. An even more common belief of that crucial bloc, swing voters who chose Trump, was that Harris supported using taxpayer dollars to pay for the transgender surgeries of undocumented immigrants in prison, something 83% believed. This was used as evidence of the efficacy of a Trump ad that aired about 30,000 times in battleground states, which included footage of Harris affirming support for just this policy. Here's the ad.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
It's hard to believe, but it's true. Even the liberal media was shocked Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens.
Every transgender inmate would have access.
Kamala's for they, them. President Trump is for you.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
This ad is being widely regarded as having secured Trump's victory and has prompted much soul-searching from the Democrats on how they talk about the transgender issue. This is, of course, welcome news. The Democrats are out of touch on the issue, and yet the ad was making an economic case about Harris just as much as it was making a cultural one. Harris was advocating using taxpayer dollars to pay for the surgeries of criminals. And it's clear that an ad that had her advocating for a private donor to pay for such surgeries would have been much less effective. The ad was powerful not because Americans oppose private adult citizens using their own money to alter their bodies, but because it suggested a misplaced compassion leading to an unfair distribution of much-needed public funds that average Americans struggle to see used to their benefit. It was the unfairness of the policy and the misplaced affinity for criminals that made the issue so salient. Like EV mandates and decriminalizing border crossing, taxpayer-funded gender-affirming surgeries are the perfect example of the Democrats abandoning their own vulnerable voters to stroke the egos of the upper middle class with vanity morals that come at the expense of a working class that's hurting. That's what another graph from the Financial Times recently showed, that the Democrats' brand as representing the working class has plummeted, even as their star of standing up for the marginalized has risen. It's the displacement that has hurt them, the displacement of the economic concerns of labor with the cultural concerns of the elites that shot Trump to victory. That is the real divide in this country, between Americans making over $100,000 a year, who Harris won, and those making under $100,000 a year, who Trump won. It's the class divide between the credentialed and the working class, between people who can afford to vote on cultural issues and the vast American middle and working class who vote on economic issues. Elites making over $100,000 imagine that their fellow Americans want help in the form of SNAP benefits or housing vouchers, and they're confused that the Democrats aren't seen as the side of the little guy. It's because what the little guy or gal really wants is not a handout. It's an economy that rewards their hard work with the most modest version of the American dream. This is what voters remember from 2019, the first time in a long while that the bottom 25% of wage earners saw a higher increase in wages than the top 25%. Unfortunately, the credentialed class has lost the ability to distinguish between the working class and the dependent poor. Democrats since the election have routinely talked about their messaging problem, but their messaging is actually spot on. It's the policy that's a problem, and it's one that's easy to fix. Here's the truth that both sides would do well to recognize sooner rather than later. Voters will forgive Democrats for a more permissive stance on abortion if the Democrats start promising to secure the border, the first step to recreating an economy that delivers for labor. The winning formula in the American working class is economically populist, socially moderate, and anti-war. This was until very recently a Democratic platform, and it could be again if the Democrats are willing to listen to their own voters.